the lightnings, rider on the storm, wearer of a crown of swords, spinner out of fate. Who thinks he turns the wheel of time may learn the truth too late.
Do you still remember who you are? Do you remember your blood?
Bittersweet are the dreams of yesteryear, of times you never saw. Sweet are the dreams of villainy, to suit your present trial. Sweet are the dreams that take you back, and bid you what if could have been, and if only it wasn't in the never was, that never comes. Bittersweet the bursting of the dream, to know those before did not do as you see with hindsight they should. Bittersweet to know that those hereafter will think the same when their dreams have soured. Bittersweet to think that those before thought the same of theirs, in the never was that never comes. Bitter sour to face ahead, to break this burden, rotten dead. Bitter vow that you would never see the fruit of this work, but sweeter yet than any else, a future destined with blood everlasting in hell. The dream is them. They are the dream that is yet to begin. Evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Mimir's Council Live this weekend with our UK update, where I'm joined by my good friends Steed and Edric. And Edric's back today. He was away last week, and we had Riss stand in for him. But just before we get on to the topics, where obviously in this show we talk a little bit more about the UK and Europe in general, more than America. Just to give a few updates on a few things, we have got a new video out. It's a very short video over at Mimmir's Brunner for people interested in that. More of the heathen racial angle. We will be doing some book recordings too soon over there. So any suggestions, send me an email of what old books you want to look at. We're looking obviously at doing some books that are not so well known and not so easily available. And I'll be doing some voiceovers for those. So, and some of the more obvious ones, although I'm a bit unsure of some of the translations I'm going to use at the moment. Just a quick note with the RC show. I've been very busy at the moment, and so has RC. So we've just kept that on the lowdown for a few weeks. So there's nothing to worry about and no panic there. Just want to reassure everybody with that. And like I say, I've just been very busy. I'm really tired even tonight, but we got to earn a living somehow. So. But we will try and keep as much, try and get these live streams, keep these live streams going as much as we can. But anyway, tonight I just want to obviously introduce my two friends, Steed and Edric. So how are you doing tonight, guys? You good, Steed?
Yeah, good. Yeah, good to speak to you, Phil, and you, Edric. And evening to all the folks in the chat and listening out there.
Yeah, and you, Edric, you good, mate?
Yeah, great, mate. Nice talking to you. Nice talking to yourself as well, Steed. Always a good one. And hello to everyone in the chat as well.
It's always a bit strange when we introduce because we normally talk for a few minutes beforehand, but I'm not sure what to do other than just bring you in like that. But so we'll get straight to it because, like I said, I'm a bit tired tonight, and I think Edric is too, and maybe even Steed because we're busy folks. But one of the first stories we've got tonight to kick us into the UK is an interesting one, and I'll just get it up for you guys so you can see it there listening, if I can. There we go. British far right becoming more racist after Black Lives Matter protests report finds. Now, I haven't read through all of this article, to be honest with you. I'll just leave it a quick scan, but basically because of all this racial pushing over Black Lives Matter, that more and more, it's not really the far right they're talking about here, and most people have probably seen this themselves with their friends and associates, that the more they push that way, the more pushback's going to come. But Steed or Edric, any of you guys got anything to say on this, or any points you want to make about this? Go view.
Just a quick little one.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah. Just a quick little one to get that started. It's almost comical in a way, isn't it? Like British far right become more racist after Black Lives Matter protest. Like what do you expect? You know, they've been talking about how the dialogue needs to focus more on, you know, racial issues and things like that for some time now. We were saying before we went live about how, you know, they talk about, you know, people being colorblind and how they don't see color and, you know, I don't see race and whatever else. That's racist in and of itself. Yep. So, you know, when you're telling people that, what do you expect? How are people gonna think? This is exactly the funny thing is, in a way, like, yeah, do you know what I mean? What do they expect of that? Just in and of itself, looking at that headline without even thinking about the article and what it's talking about. And we'll get onto Patriotic Alternative and maybe a little bit to do with Ricky Doolan as well and things like that when we get there. But just on the headline alone, it's almost comical in a way that say that it's a little bit cheeky in a way.
Yeah, I mean,
I think.
Yes, Steve.
Go for it.
Go for it. I was just going to introduce you, mate. You're good.
No, I think they're patting themselves on the back, to be honest, with this article. I think it's honestly, I think this was their desired outcome. You know, that the kind of entities that were pushing the Black Lives Matter stuff, this was their desired outcome to polarize as much as possible, to push the people that threaten their vision of society as much out into the spotlight as possible, or coax us out. in a sense, because as we mentioned, I think it was in the last live stream we did, Phil. I think we mentioned how, you know, you and I were brought up with this idea that you should be colorblind, that you shouldn't see race. And now all of a sudden in the last few months, we're being told you should see race. And, you know, I know Edric just mentioned that as well. And, you know, when you think about it, this makes sense, because how can they have any kind of anti-white policy if people are colorblind? They need people to see color now, because it's the only way that they can really bring about this truly kind of overtly anti-white society that they want to bring out. And I think with this article, they're saying, you know, hooray for us, look at us, we achieved what we wanted to. We pushed these racially conscious people to be openly racially conscious. You know, now we can try and legislate against them. We can try and set them up for a fall. We can shine a spotlight on them and try and teach the world to hate them as much as we do.
Yeah, I mean, carry on, Adrian. Go for it, mate.
I was just going to say, I think they were hoping that when it all kicked off at the beginning with the Black Lives Matter thing and stuff like that, that people would react more sort of publicly, violently, boots on the ground, sort of people kicking off. And that didn't really happen. I don't know if you remember, there was that thing a few weeks back. I can't remember what it was called now, but it was a bunch of like Black Lives Matter type protesters wearing uniform marching in the street. And it was obviously an op, like it was nonsense. But I think that they were pushing really hard and hoping that people would really seriously kick off in a visible public way. That didn't really happen. And now they're getting to this point where they're sort of clutching at straws in a way, trying to, you know, saying whatever they're saying here. But obviously, people are becoming more, let's say, racist. It's what, like Steed said a moment ago, it's what they've been pushing for, and they've been pushing for it hard as well. So it's almost like they are patting themselves on the back in a way.
Well, Steed made a good point there. Like, it's the only real way forward. They've been pushing the anti-white agenda for a very long time now, as most of the people listening here will be aware of. We've been seeing it for many years, and a lot of our more normal friends, you know, that probably, you know, just enjoy average things and haven't been aware of things that have coming. They've been out of the loop a little bit, like just Steve rightly said there, to take it to the next level, they really need to divide us now. There can't be this idea that we're all just the same race, although they will still push that. They will still push this idea that, you know, anybody can be British, of course, but at the same time as they're pushing that, they're going to divide us into classes, rather than the old class system of upper, you know, middle class, working class, and upper class. Now they're going to be pushing us into racial classes, and obviously, as we know and as we've seen over the years, this doesn't normally bode very well for white folk, because we're the ones that are being that are legally able to be left off job applications. Whenever there's I think we talked about this a little bit last week too, Steve, where we talked about the grooming gangs again, and I bring these up all the time because they're very important to bring up. Well, grooming gangs, child rape, Pakistani gangs is what they are, but when they're always, their excuse for this is they don't want to cause racial tensions. But obviously, Black Lives Matter obviously is going to cause racial tensions. I mean, the whole, like you say, the title there is silly. British far right becoming more racist after a group that purports for that Black Lives Matter above all others, even though they make these convoluted arguments as why they actually don't mean that. When you see the boots on the ground of these people, they're violent and they don't really care. They talk about rising up. They talk about all these things against the host nation and the host people, which is, of course, us, the native English. They're obviously exceptionally racially motivated, but no one would call them racist in the media, but they're called far-right people, or what they consider far-right, which I don't even believe it is far-right, as we've talked about on this show before. It's just more natural, right? People that see their homelands being invaded and changing, unrecognized. Some areas are totally unrecognizable, having some pushback, and then seeing these people that are changing, coming here. And we've got to remember that most people that came here came after the 1940s, and most of the people that are here probably came in the 1990s under the Labour government, the late 1990s. So we're talking, these are pretty recent immigrants that are all coming here and demanding that after they've come here seeking a better life and now are demanding more from us. And the people, like Steve said, when we were younger, that grew up being taught, that we were all colorblind and all equal, are suddenly going, hold on, we're not equal anymore. And that's what they're talking about here with the more racist quote there. They're just saying people are starting to be fed up, but like I say, they want it because they need to push to move forward with the anti-white agenda. They have to step it up. They have to make the racial divide visible. This is why you'll see on the BBC people talking about on all these stupid morning shows where they try to have these debates about it. But has anybody else got anything to add about that before we? Because like I say, there's an undertitle in that, if you can't see it very well, that says exclusive, and it says growth of new patriotic alternative group suggests shift towards more openly racial politics. But does anybody want to speak about that before we go on to the Ricky Doolan and patriotic alternative kind of stuff that was going on?
To lead it into the sort of Ricky Doolan, Laura Towler, patriotic alternative thing, it's funny in a way. They'll say that I've just lost my train of thought. What was I trying to say then? The Ricky Doolan stuff.
I can pick up if you want, and you can hop in after me, mate.
Yeah, I'll try and refresh my memory.
Yeah. So good. No, just on that subject, reading through that article, the gaslighting is unbelievable. And anyone who doesn't know what gaslighting means, because we often assume that people know what these terms mean.
Yeah.
But gaslighting is basically when you're doing something to someone, you're imposing something on someone knowingly, whilst convincing them that they're crazy for thinking that you're doing it. I think it comes from a film where
it does.
Is it someone's turning up the gas or something, and someone's saying that they can smell gas, but they're saying no, you can't. You're imagining it, something like that. I might have got that completely wrong, but in this article, it says it does the usual thing of saying that patriotic alternative believe in an agenda to replace whites in their own homeland, and it talks about this a couple of times as though it's provably nonsense. We all know that it's not nonsense, obviously. But I'm reminded of something that I saw Morgoth post recently, actually, which is the 10 stages of genocide. And I'll just quickly go through them. Number 1 is classification, dividing into us and them. Number 2 is symbolization. People are forced to identify themselves. Number 3, discrimination. People begin to face systemic discrimination. And this is against whites. What whites now face systemic discrimination because we are the only ones who are not allowed a homeland. We're the only ones who don't get positive discrimination for job roles and things like that. We're discriminated against. Dehumanization, we're equated with vermin. I mean, this is particularly true of nationalists. They refer to nationalists as though we're not human. Number 5 is organization. The government creates special groups to enforce the policies. Number 6, polarization. So I think we're definitely at least at number 6 because
where are these 10 from? Because obviously I'm familiar with the UN's definitions. I'm not sure if I'm familiar with these 10.
These are from Genocide Watch. These are the 10 steps from Genocide Watch. But I think they're pretty similar to the UN ones.
There's 4 or 5 main ones in the UN. They're not as specific as that. But obviously, if you're an organisation called Genocide Watch, is probably going to be a little bit more specific.
Yeah. So as we said, when we were younger in the Britain of 20 years ago, a couple of decades ago, we were taught that we were all equal. Everyone had equal opportunity. Race and color didn't exist. But now, in order to go through with these stages of genocide, which I think are provably occurring, they need to create this identification between one group and another. They need to separate out the indigenous Europeans because it's the only way that they're going to be able to target us for increased anti-white policy, which will eventually result in some pretty serious stuff occurring in Europe.
Oh yeah, like you say, gaslighting is a great point, and like I say, that is very, as Julie said in the chat there, one of the best ways to explain it is the abuser basically uses it to confuse the victim. You're not being abused, right? This didn't happen, so you can hide and you make the victim confused to the point where you can manipulate them. So, like a classic case, I suppose, where you might have seen on media or something would be a man cheating on his wife, and his wife finds evidence, but he convinces his wife that she's going a bit insane, and that didn't really happen, So she gets into this psychological loop where she thinks she's going mad, while he gets away with what he wants to get away with. If you get me, that would probably be one of the something that probably people can relate to. But it can be a lot worse than that. But they're gaslighting us, constant gaslighting in this. Like I say, that's a really important point. That and like you say, it's in that article. I mean, I only skimmed through that article. I did have another point, but I forgot it now. But Edric, have you picked up your train of thought there? So I don't want you to lose it again if you did.
Yeah, it was only a small comment. Actually, I was going to say it's funny they're saying growth of new patriotic alternative group and things like that. I mean, patriotic alternative is new in some ways, but it's been around for a year or so, since early 2019 maybe. It's well established now. It's got a relatively decent following.
Yeah,
the likes of Ricky Doolan and his British Lives Matter and all that has literally popped out the ground in the last few weeks. No one had heard of that. No one cares. Yeah, it's come out of nowhere. I was just gonna say that. It's funny the language. Ricky, yeah. Oh Jesus, yeah. I was just gonna say it's funny. The likes of this guy here has literally popped out the ground out of nowhere. But something like Patriotic Alternative has been developing over the course of time. It is well established. It's not a new thing in the sense that it's just appeared. What is that? British Lives Matter or whatever. It's almost like, in a sense, that's obviously it's like a controlled opposition thing, but it's a funny play on that kind of thing. It's almost inverting that. It's kind of a clown world take on controlled opposition, because I remember seeing something a few days ago about how Tommy Robinson, the death of Tommy Robinson, and how people don't care about the likes of Tommy Robinson anymore, and British nationalism is becoming more racialist and more switched on to racial concerns and things like that. They're talking about the death of Tommy Robinson and things. Well, this guy, Ricky Doolan, and his British Lives Matter thing and all that, it's almost even more ridiculous than the whole, Mossad, Tommy Robinson kind of Israeli type thing. It's a strange situation with the Ricky Doolan thing.
I mean, to be honest, I hadn't heard of these guys till Laura, who does a lot of work with Patriotic Alternative, decided to do an interview with her, but interview with him. Sorry, I could say her though, but decided to do an interview. I mean, I don't know where it came from, but I let her look at the site. I mean, this picture kind of sums it up, because it just shows the ridiculousness. For people that don't know, they have this group, I believe, called British Lives Matter, and they're trying to be some kind of push back against this against Black Lives Matter, I assume, right, guys? I mean, is this like a pushback against Black Lives Matter, with this kind of colorblind, multiracial, beautiful? I don't know what their angle is exactly, because they like he says they're kind of comical. Yeah,
I think that is the sales pitch, that it's a pushback against Black Lives Matter. But I did listen to the stream with Laura, and this guy repeated a few times in that stream, "Do you stand for black people? Do you stand for such and such?" And it's like, okay, so you're meant to be this like British Lives Matter or whatever, and it's a response to that Black Lives Matter thing and all that. But half of your argument is like, do you stand for these people? Do you stand for those people? And it's like, well, no, that's not Patriotic Alternative, and other groups like that obviously stand for the British, which is specifically a Northwestern European, thereby white ethnic group. It's not, anything else. It's laughable. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I didn't watch the interview. I haven't had time. I've been very busy, so I haven't had time to watch the interview yet. I did want to get round to it, but I really couldn't stand the guy because he has a very strange accent. If I remember, he has I don't know how to explain it. It's like, for people that live in England will know that there's the Pakistani types are the, as we call them, Asian, but there are, Pakistani Indians. Some of them take on the voice of like a Jamaican, but they have their own twang to it. He sounds like a Pakistani taking on a Jamaican. I don't know if any of you guys picked that up. I just thought it was kind of a bizarre accent to have.
I've heard that accent a few times recently in the last year or so from mostly white people living or probably brought up in London, where it's this kind of combination of like black type accent and like Pakistani type accent sort of blended together. And they talk in a dead specific way that it's not. I feel like if they were to be in a conversation with ourselves or other people from wherever in England or Scotland or anywhere in the UK, within half an hour they would stop talking like that. Do you know what I mean? It almost feels fake in a way. It doesn't feel like their voice. It feels like they're doing this
Yeah, definitely
weird little thing.
Yeah, definitely. There's some, I don't know, but anyway, like I say, it's a very strange thing. But I mean, it speaks to. I mean, this is the epitome of civic nationalism, right, Steve? I mean, I know you wanted to bring this up a little bit, but I mean, that picture there kind of sums it all up. In that way, this is what civic nationalism is all about. It has nothing really to do with any nationalism. They don't want to change anything. They don't want to change anything. I mean, it's like a revolution with no revolution, right? They just want to keep everything pretty much the same.
Yeah, I'd honestly like to know what his problem is with Black Lives Matter, because obviously, by virtue of forming this group, British Lives Matter, that suggests that, as we've just said, that's kind of like a counter to Black Lives Matter. But I wonder if he would even be able to articulate what his problem is with Black Lives Matter, because he's very pro-immigrant. He's very, very clearly very fond of black people.
Very fun.
Yeah, very fond.
Very,
but,
very fond.
which is fine, and but it's like, I don't know what I genuinely don't know what his issue is, and frankly, I can't take him seriously even as a civic nationalist. I don't believe that he's even a civic nationalist. I think he's just plain and simple a anti-nationalist and anti-white, who either off his own volition or with some kind of backing or encouragement has tried to come in and kind of co-opt some section of the patriotic movement in the wake of Black Lives Matter, realizing that a lot of white British people will have seen all the Black Lives Matter stuff and been pretty concerned about what they saw. I think it was inevitable that you're going to get people like this come along, whether genuine or fake, and try and kind of lead those people astray and lead them into some kind of meaningless sense of nationalism or identity. But I just can't see that many people taking his position seriously. I mean,
I don't think he's there to be serious. I mean, there was a bit of me that didn't really want to talk about him too much because I mean, he is a complete idiot. I mean, and he's tried to be a singer. He's obviously a guy that enjoys he's like a televangelist. I don't even believe he's Christian, to be honest. I think he's just in it for the money and the little bit of ego stroking he gets from this kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think that guy, as far as what opposition he might have to Black Lives Matter goes and things like that, like how can he say that he's in any way oppositional to that when, like I said a moment ago, he spent a significant portion of time live with Laura saying, "Do you stand with for black people?" and things like that. If that's the case, and if that's how you feel, then what are you arguing? I don't get it, and it makes the whole Tommy sort of thing almost seem as though it almost feels genuine in comparison to something like this. And I don't necessarily want to call this guy a grifter or something like that. I feel like this guy might be a complete and total hack. I mean, he brought up the Holocaust and said 8 million. I don't care who you are or what you think or what your opinion on anything is. We're 8 million. 8 million. He used 8 million. So I feel like he's not that stupid. Do you know what I mean? He's not that thick. He runs a marketing firm. This guy runs a marketing firm. I think there's some chicanery going on with this fella and that whole thing. It's a little bit shady, and it's perfectly timed for something a little bit shady.
I did see some people saying that maybe Laura shouldn't have debated him because he's a bit of a distraction. He's a bit of a he's meant to put a spanner in the works, as it were, just to drag us. And it does bring up an important point, especially just look at him with his British Lives Matter. The whole idea that they're not really a political party, they're not really anything, and it does put us into perspective of this idea of a one-trick pony. That it drags groups like Patriotic Alternative constantly in a debate of justification, right? We're indigenous people. We should be here. We get constantly drawn into this debate. And then when the outsider looking in only sees that debate, they just see us talking about this. So nobody will take us seriously as any political party because we have no political stances, except for we're indigenous. And then we'll argue forever. So
we're constantly forced to argue our own existence. We're constantly forced in this way to justify our existence.
Yeah, and these types of people constantly are there to constantly push that, to constantly confront us with that, and what it does, it just keeps us locked in there where we struggle to move on. So maybe that's something we need to think about, how we can just I don't even really care to argue. You know, it's common sense to me, and all the arguments against us being indigenous are disingenuous. If you actually have a debate with somebody about this, what you end up doing is they just try to make these kind of these small points, these type of intellectual points where they just try to it's more like debating a lawyer in court, where they're just trying to catch you out with a word, as opposed to any genuine understanding of what it means to be indigenous.
That's my deal breaker. It's the crux of my argument. If I'm debating with someone and they outright state that there is no such thing as an indigenous Englishman or Scandinavian or European, whatever, then as far as I'm concerned, that's it. Debate over. I'm not going to speak to them on the subject anymore, because there can be no rational outcome from that argument anymore. And from what I heard, Laura pretty much did that, and that's how she I heard that she cut the debate short once she realized that this guy couldn't even acknowledge that there was such thing as an ethnic English or British person, and that's the right thing to do, because it shouldn't even be negotiable.
No, and I know I heard good things about Laura on the interview. I'm not. I just wanted to bring up at the beginning. Some people were talking that they shouldn't deal with these because actually it just gives them these guys attention. But I did hear good things about how Laura handled the so-called debate. But as somebody wrote in the chat there that that actually Laura destroyed them, and the little clips that I saw, it did look like that. So sorry,
Laura
Edric,
made. Yeah, I was going to say Laura made the guy look, as stupid as he was, really. But it's one of them things where it almost feels as well. It's not even that it feels this way. It definitely is the case that what we need to do is develop a robust, very specific and recognizable sort of self-fulfilling, let's say, maybe, description of not only our ideological position, but who we are, that is impossible to deny. Because I think part of the problem is that the cultural zeitgeist is one whereby the average English person, the average German, the average Norwegian, whatever else, is by default looked at as if they do not exist. And so we have to we need to put something out there where people can recognize as from the beginning
Yeah.
Oh, I understand where this person is coming from, and I understand what they think, because I think part of the problem is that for the vast majority of people, someone like myself or either of you two or anyone in the chat will come along and say, this is us, this, they'll start to argue their case, and there's almost like an information gap or a knowledge barrier. Do you know what I mean? And I think we need to figure out a way to get around that, where in a way whereby we can influence the cultural zeitgeist for people, the average person who's not switched on to anything or whatever, to understand that this is the way that it is, and this is who we are. And you are a distinct, recognizable ethnic group, whether you're an English person or you're a German person or whatever. You are a distinct, recognizable people. It's funny in a way that the arguments, when it comes to that, like going back to that Ricky Doolan fella for a second, he argued throughout the whole thing, what is a native British person, blah, 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 whatever. And then it's like, so they'll make that argument, but then in another breath, on the other hand, they'll say, black people in Britain or whatever have had this hard time or whatever. So it's like, well, what is it then? Is it the case that like everyone's British and we're all comfy and good? Or is it the case that, there is a native people who this island belongs to fundamentally, and those other people who are here are sort of, just here because that's where they've, moved and things like that.
Yeah, sorry, Edric, it's exactly like when David Lammy tells everyone that he's as British as the next person.
Yeah,
but
exactly.
In the next tweet, he's complaining about the crimes of British people throughout history.
Yeah,
it's like, so
yeah, exactly.
Are you a victim or perpetrator of that crime? Make your mind up, sort of thing.
Yeah,
I did carry on.
Sorry, just a quick one. I just want to say the only way around that is for us to put across a consistent, coherent, instantly recognizable position that people, the average person who's not switched on to politics and whatever else, can say, oh yeah, I understand.
Yeah, I mean, I had a funny tweet once where I was playing somebody up that said the Romans were black. So I responded by basically going, oh, so it was black people that enslaved the Brits then, the native Brits. And then they said, now you're being racist. And I was like, well, you just claimed that the Romans were black, right? Well, they, historically they came here and enslaved the Brits. So I just go with their nonsense and take it to its extremes. But I agree. We need some. I mean, I'm thinking of doing a video where I just explain very simply. I mean, the word indigenous is the confusion with it all anyway, when you talk about the indigenous part, because as people in the chat are rightfully saying, the New Zealand Maori are classed indigenous, even though they were the 14th century, 1300s. They didn't get there till then, because indigenous does not mean you sprouted out of the ground there. But that is the confusion with the definition of indigenous, and this is why you end up playing this game of more like a lawyer, more semantics really, where they're saying, well, there were these people here or those people there or these and these moved or this moved or whatever. But I don't want to go into that all right now, because we are going, I don't want to be on too long tonight, because I do feel, and somebody did mention this, and I'm sorry if my nose sounds a little bit blocked tonight. I am a little bit under the weather. I've worn myself out a little bit, but I'm good, just a little bit. So I don't want to go over tonight too much. But it leads us really, it leads us really into a story that we've missed one out, but I'll try and get to that one as well. But it leads us into the proof that all this is nonsense, right? The absolute proof that what Ricky Doolan promotes is absolute horse crap. When we look at articles like this, huge crowd gathers to celebrate Pakistan Independence Day in East London. Despite COVID warning, it says there as well. But what this actually shows us is that all these people who are celebrating their independence from Britain, so they're celebrating their independence from Britain, that then moved to Britain after they got their independence from Britain to seek a better life, because after they got their independence from Britain, their country's turned into, quite literally in some ways, shitholes. then they came to Britain for a better life, then celebrate leaving Britain. I mean, the ridiculousness of this. How does the we're all the same deep down, they're just as British as you or me, explain this? They cannot explain this. That thousands are celebrating independence from a country they then ran to because after they gained independence, it turned to crap. And I don't know why that article is... Oh, there it is. But there are videos here, and sorry about my mouse is broken on this. But I mean, there are videos here. I'll try and just show you this one here, make it a bit bigger. I don't know how you're going to see that, or if you can see it very well, but it's just madness. There's just thousands of people.
The funny thing is, in this article, they're making references to face masks not being worn and coronavirus warnings and whatever else. But if this was a nationalist march, if this was anything to do with, you know, the British or the English or anything like that, the way in which they're talking about it would be with much harder words. It would be much more stern.
Yeah. I mean, it's. I mean, do you want to say anything to say about this, Steve? Because I mean, it's absolutely crazy, really.
I don't know. I despair, not because of the scenes that we're seeing there, because that doesn't surprise me. You know, I've spent enough time in London and major cities in England.
This video now is Ilford, by the way, in London.
Yeah, I mean, I know some people would be surprised to learn that, but it doesn't surprise me. Well, the only thing that surprises me is just that anyone can look at that and not think, you know, what has happened to our country. I just don't understand how anyone can look at that and not immediately become a nationalist. You know,
it's sad, isn't it? Like, I'm glad, I know this sounds terrible, but in some ways, I'm glad that my grandparents have passed, because they would be heartbroken to see something like this. And I mean, they would be heartbroken on a fundamental emotional level, not even, you know, an intellectually sort of recognizing what's going on. This is what I'm looking at kind of level, but just in their gut, it's something else.
Yeah, I mean, the scenes there are. I mean, and like I say, it just completely knocks on its arse the civic nationalism. These people do not want to assimilate. People, a few years ago, quite a few years ago, it was when David Cameron was still in power, still Prime Minister. He did a speech at Wembley, and this was for the Indians. Modi, the Indian Prime Minister, was visiting the UK. And this really got covered up. Nobody really covered this story at the time. But he was there talking to them. They completely filled Wembley to see a Prime Minister of India. And these were all apparently British people. Yeah, but they were obviously all Indians. And they were cheering him when he spoke. He like a rock star almost. And he did this thing where it doesn't matter the colour of your passport, you're all Indian. He literally did that too. Massive roars in the audience, right? All these British people that Ricky says are just as British as me. They're cheering that it doesn't matter the colour of their passport, they're all Indian. Yeah, and then David Cameron actually attended this rock star type ceremony for a Prime Minister of another country, and he went there and he was licking, kissing some butt there and going, with all the great Indians in this country, talking about Britain, he was basically said it won't be long till there's an Indian Prime Minister of Britain, to which the whole crowd erupted, because these average Brits would love to be represented by their own, and this is the point. That's all we want. That's all we want. We want a nation that is our own, where we can be represented by our own. Now, they have that, but they come here and it's not enough for them. Because most of what they go for, especially India and Pakistan, and people go, oh, Indians are better, blah, 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 blah. Maybe they might be slightly better than the other. I don't want any of them here. And the reason is because a lot of what they do is out of revenge. They want, because of the empire, when we ruled India, they want to now rule Britain. And if you want to set up a system where you're going to allow people that actively dislike you and want to set up, they don't believe that they are persecuted. Sorry about the banging upstairs. I think one of my little people have just got out of bed to go to the toilet or something, but I do apologise. But yeah. Anyway, guys, I'll let one of you carry on here. Have you got anything else to say about what I just said there? Sorry I brought up the Modi thing, but it just reminded me of it.
Yeah, well, they're either here out of revenge, as you said, or purely for economic gain. And both of those, either of those options is reprehensible to me, because England is not an airport. It's not a shopping mall, and the fact that it's seen as such by large swathes of the world and our own leaders, it disgusts me on a visceral level.
Even worse than that, it's also seen that way by some of our own people as well.
Yeah. It's not a homeland to anyone. They say England doesn't belong to anyone. They'll say, of course, Palestine belongs to Palestinians, and some of them on more on the right will say Israel belongs to Jews, and people they'll say that, but they'll never say England belongs to the English. And that's all I want. I've never ever called for forced deportations or anything like that. Obviously, there's certain, probably quite a few circumstances where that should be permissible. But all I ever wanted was recognition that England belongs to the English, that it should be not predominantly, it should be entirely ruled and governed by English people. And that's all that any nation should be able to expect, that as a base minimum.
I just want my country as I know it, as I knew it, and I want my children and things like that to have the country that I had growing up. Do you know what I mean? This is the land that I knew, and it's not the land that I knew when I was a kid. It's different already. My hometown is a very different place than what it was when I was a little boy. This country is changing, and it's changing beyond recognition, and it's changing exponentially and rapidly. I don't know if you still want to talk about this, Phil, but there was a graph that you wanted to bring up.
Definitely want to show that. Yeah, I'll get it up now so people can see what you're talking about. But yeah, carry on, mate, and I'll get it.
Yeah, sure. There was a graph you wanted to bring up. I think it's regarding Germany, actually, and the way in which population and demographics are changing in Germany, and how they're changing quickly as well. And the scariest thing about it is, the young people. I seen a video recently regarding the UK, about how they always talk about how by 2066 we're going to be a minority in the British Isles. They love that number, 2066. It's funny because it's 1,000 years after a particular date that was very significant in its own way. But the way the things are now, it could change even sooner than 2066, because all of the people who are still knocking about are our grandparents, and they're popping their clogs, they're old, and the young people, our young people, are vastly dwarfed by foreigners. So it's like, how is that going to manifest? And is it going to manifest over the course of 40 years or 20 years, when people who are in their 80s now are dead by the time they're 85 to 95, let's say, and people who are currently in school are reaching adult sort of working age and things like that? The demographics in this country, and Germany as well, as you can see looking at this graph, are going to change very quickly in the next, let's say, 5 to 10 years, in my opinion. By 2030, Europe is going to be a very different place, and already it's a very different place than it was in 2000, which is a very different place than it was in 1990. It's exponential, and it's happening quicker and quicker.
Yeah, I mean, that graph there, just to explain it a little bit for people that might not fully understand it straight away, that is a graph from Germany, as Edric said. And it shows population by immigrant background, which is the red, and non-immigrant background, which is the blue, and then total population, which is the black. And as you can see, over 50s is where the majority of the German population is. Over 50. 40s, it's about equal. Under 30s, it's majority immigrant. Well, if under 30s are your majority immigrant population, and as you see, as you go down to under 10s, it is 2/3 majority immigrant background. Okay, so as you go down to the bottom there of under 10s, 2/3 of Germans under 10s look there, or roughly 2/3 by that graph at least, are of immigrant background. Now this shows that, as Edric says, everybody, they've got a use by date, all these countries, or sell by date, or whatever you want to call it, where at some point we're going to be, and this is where then they tell us that this is more gaslighting. In one sentence they say that we're not being replaced, and in the next that actually make a joke about how funny it is that by 1066 or whatever that we're being minorities. And like Edric said, this is going to be a lot faster. Because as we see there with Germany, the majority of their population is I'd say over 45. Majority of the German national population, German ethnic Germans, are over 45. So, if you take average ages and then, as soon as you trim off the next 20 years, with that growth at the bottom there, I mean, it's going to become unrecognisable. It won't be Germany anymore. And the response to this by civic nationalists is, well, we're all the same. Well, we're not, and that's what we fight for. Somebody mentioned earlier in the chat that, we're not racial supremacists or any of these things. We just want our own country. And this is why we've got to really counter this gaslighting. We've got to really, really make very simple arguments to counter this stuff, because it's happening rapid. 20 years from now, Germany, the working population of Germany will be pretty much depleted of ethnic Germans. There's going to be nothing left. There'll be nothing left in Germany to fight for soon. And I really hope the Germans wake up soon. And we're a little bit better off than Germany. That graph shocked me, actually. But with the recent, a few years ago, Germany had a big push where they had their borders open. But anybody who got to their borders was granted automatic asylum, which obviously you can imagine didn't just entice immigrants, but also criminals. Because obviously, if somebody says, I'm going to give you if you've got no documentation of who you are and you turn up on our border and we give you a passport, well, I can make up a name, I can make up anything. So it encourages a lot of criminals too. So not just immigrants, but immigrants with criminal backgrounds to wipe their slate clean and become a German overnight. That really, by the looks of that, really, really hammered. And that was just 1 year of madness. Anyway, guys, anybody want to add anything there? Because this stuff is the real sad stuff, the real horrible stuff that we have to deal with.
Yeah, just a quick one, and this is heartbreaking to admit, to be honest. But you talk about how Germany is a little bit ahead of us. They're in, their situation is a little bit worse than ours is, and things like that. But you did show that video of London, only moments ago, and you could have convinced me that was anywhere other than the British Isles.
Oh, definitely.
It's not like that in my town. My town isn't like what it was when I was a kid. But it's not like that, and it's not like that in most places. Let's say, and maybe in Birmingham, maybe in Manchester. There's a few places up and down the United Kingdom where things are looking dire, and sadly, they are major metropolitan city centres, which are economically, socially,
and population-wise, they're very big.
Yeah,
population-wise.
Yeah, population-wise, there's a lot of people, densely populated places. It's a very, very sad state of affairs. And yeah, when you look at the figures, things are a little bit worse maybe in Germany, but I mean, some places in our home, they're looking worse for wear, and it's sad. It's very sad.
Yeah, Birmingham is unrecognisable to me from when I was a child. I mean, completely unrecognisable. People, I'm only 40 years old, but I could walk around Birmingham when I was, 10, and there was some Afro-Caribbean community there, but it was very small percentage. There were, I don't really remember seeing many Indians at all. There were a few, but not that many. Now, Pakistani Indian community just absolute dominates that area. Not even the Afro-Caribbean community there. Because it's all immigration that's caused this, and the immigration mostly occurred in the 90s.
I think Liverpool is a good example in some ways, in the sense that Liverpool has had a historically large black community, as well as a historically large Chinese community. It's been an Irish. It's been quite mixed to some extent in lots of different ways in Liverpool for a long time. And despite that, it's quite a bit behind cities like Manchester and Birmingham and things like that. Nevertheless, I walk around Liverpool today, and it is a very, very different city to the city that I recognised as a little boy. It's a very different place. And I think that's quite a stark example in a way, because, as I say, old Chinese community, old African community, recognizable Chinese and African communities as well. Despite that, it's still experiencing some of these things at a slower pace than cities like Birmingham and Manchester and things like that.
Yeah.
And despite that, it is a totally different place to the place that I knew as a little boy. There are little towns in the suburbs of Liverpool, which when I was a kid was, as far as I was concerned, 100% white. I'm sure that, demographically, as far as the census data goes and things like that, it was 99.8% white or something like that. But it was, lots of these little towns which were very, very white around Liverpool. These days, you've got, Turkish barbers, Turkish restaurants, people making little sand dogs on the street, busking, whatever. Very different places than what they were only 15 years ago, only 20 years ago. So even in cities like Liverpool, it's happening so fast.
Yeah, I mean, it's a big change for most people. People growing up don't believe it, and this is where the rewriting of history, something we're not going to be able to go into tonight, but as we see on the television, and the BBC is a big proponent of this, where they rewrite our history to pretend that all these immigrants have been here forever, right, when they haven't. I can attest to that from my childhood, so can Steed, and even Edric, who's a little bit younger than both of us. So this is very new and very recent. And unless we do something, unless we start resisting, and you've got to resist with your voice first, and we've got to be, to a point, proud of who we are, proud of what we represent. And this is becoming easier with Black Lives Matter stuff, because they are trying to polarize, but that's okay. We've got to go with the flow, as it were. They want to polarize, we've got a chance to polarize on our terms just as much as they have on theirs, and we've got to always try to see where we can get advantage from their tactics, because any kind of change always invokes an element of chaos. If you're hammering a nail, you've got to smack. There is that element of confusion there that we've got to try and use to our best ability. But I know we did want to just talk a little bit about the COVID stuff, and I was meant to link that in with the Pakistani stuff, because they were all celebrating, and I showed the video there. Not one of them was wearing a mask. Now, not that we here care about people wearing masks or not, but that leads us into the idea that, there were no police arresting them, there were no one clamping down. But, if you walk to your local shop or something, they want to fine you and arrest you. If you want to pick up some fines, there's plenty of fines there. They're all on camera, find their identities. But
sorry, Phil, I was just going to say, before we move on to the COVID stuff, I think Steed's got a few bits and pieces he still wanted to say about Germany. Yes. And before he says that as well, I was just looking at the chat then, and someone's popped up with anyone got a white pill. And I don't want to leave this conversation regarding demographics and things like that on such a heavy negative tone. I think there are things that we can say that are positive. Sometimes it can feel difficult to, pull that out the bag, let's say, because things are quite dark at the moment in a lot of ways. But I think there are some things we can be positive about. Things are moving quickly, and there are some things that we can say that are quite positive on that note. So I
Yeah.
think before we move on to coronavirus and whatever, it might be
But-
nice to box this discussion off with Steed finishing what he had to say about Germany, and also maybe a little white pill about
Well,
demographics.
I will
and-
talk a little bit about white pill, right? Sometimes there's a carrot and a stick, and they both can be effective. And white pills can sometimes lead to false security. I hear this a lot sometimes, that people go, well, you know, you're just being down. Well, you know, something that's going to get me out of bed is a good breakfast might get me out of bed. My partner might go, I've cooked you a real nice breakfast. That might get me out of bed, but also we're throwing a bucket of water over my freaking head. You know what I mean? So and we've got to get out of bed here. You know what I mean? And trying to sugarcoat everything is not the way. Sometimes we need to kick up the arse to prevent it. So I get the idea of a white pill, but also sometimes, you know, the truth, the reality can sometimes be a refresher. And sometimes when I'm confronted with that, I find it hard to just give out a white pill. You know, it upsets me. And I get angry. And I don't really want a white pill. I don't want someone sugarcoating for me at that point. But I get what people are saying, but I just thought I'd put that in there for a little second. But sorry, Steed, please give us your points on this. Talk about a little bit about finishing up with the Germany stuff and anything you've got to say about white pills.
Yeah, no worries. You were on a roll. I didn't want to interrupt.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll throw a bit of a white pill out there first, briefly.
Yeah, do.
I and many that I know have believed for many years now. I mean, I've been involved in nationalism for about 15 years or so now. And I've known for at least half that time that things need to get a lot worse before they can get better. So in a strangely kind of perverse way, I look at everything that's happening now, even with the tyranny surrounding this hoax virus. And that's almost a white pill to me, because I'm seeing people waking up, and I'm seeing people waking up because of the Black Lives Matter thing. And I know that it still needs to get even worse from this point before people are really going to wake up to any serious degree. So to me, that to some people that might not sound like a white pill, but to me that's a white pill. On the subject of Germany, throughout my life, I've spent quite a lot of time in Germany. I've got lots of German friends, even some German family, and I've visited them many, many times since I was a child. And I've always sensed this very palpable kind of sense of Germanness in the people and the culture there. There's just something. It's almost like you can sense that folk soul that they've got there. And you know, I remember, you know, being up a pine-clad mountain in the snow when I was young, and people were sledding down and things. And I still now, when the snow falls over here, it still takes me back to that place. But all around me there were white Germans. And when I go to Germany in more recent years, and I visit areas which are full of Turks and Moroccans and whatnot, it's got none of that German spirit to it. And I think anyone who is tuned into this idea of ethnicities and identities will pick up on that. So the idea that Germany can still be Germany without ethnic Germans is just absurd. And that goes for any country. But the Germans are a funny people, because, you know, we've seen recently they had a big protest in Berlin over the COVID regulations and stuff, against masks and that. And I think Germany has probably led the way in terms of these protests against all of this stuff that's going on. So clearly, evidently, they do still have a dissident kind of rebellious streak to them. And I think in some ways that's actually enhanced by the fact that they believe they were misled in the 1930s. So they feel like they need to be more vigilant against their own authorities now. The problem is that stops when it comes to anything racial, for exactly the same reason, because, you know, they can't question authority, their own authority, when it comes to anything remotely related to race. Which is why I think the powers that be, the globalists, knew that they could flood Germany with, you know, 1 million non-Germans, 1 million non-whites over a single summer, because as much of a spirit as the Germans have against, you know, unconsensual kind of authoritarian changes like that, they will not speak up on anything that's remotely racially related. And this is a real problem that they've got, and it's probably the reason why they're in a worse state. The only reason that they're in a worse state than we are in England. And it's really sad to see. So yeah, that's pretty much what I've got to say on Germany.
Yeah, I mean, Germany, like you say, I've seen a lot of there's hope in German people, but they're going to get outnumbered soon. And this is where the blonde beast that's crawling in the recess of their minds needs to wake up. Before Carl Gustav Jung decided to go back on it, he actually saw that the original movements that were happening in the late 1920s, well, actually the early 1900s up to the 1920s, he saw in that he saw in that the great healing of the German people, actually, where their darkness was going to come out and they were going to be better for it. But he changed his mind a little bit after. He always used to refer to himself as German, but then he referred to himself as obviously Swiss after the war, because we know why. But I won't go into much detail of that. But yeah, because the show's got on a bit now, I just want to wrap up with some of the COVID stuff, because obviously we talk about that quite a lot here, and it is a big important part of all of this. Obviously, it's not. In some ways, it's not as important as the racial things, and it is as important in other ways. It's kind of hard to say, because for anything that COVID could do to us, or any authoritarianism, if our people remained, if all of England remained English, I know that there'd always be hope for resistance. At the moment, we're being hit on two fronts. We're getting this authoritarian, globalist agenda come in with the COVID-19 nonsense, but it's nonsense on one point, but on the other hand, it's very dangerous. At the same time as we're being divided into a million different, and this is a false division where they're bringing people in to divide us, so that we're kind of in between the hammer and the anvil at the moment. So, guys, any news about the COVID stuff that you want to bring up, or just talk to that people might not have seen or might need to be aware of?
Yeah, before we get into the COVID stuff properly, I just want to say, regarding whether or not it's important versus the demographic stuff going on, the things that we've just discussed over the last hour, I think it is worth saying that whether or not you recognize it right now, I do believe, rightly or wrongly, I don't know, but I do believe firmly that the COVID stuff is going to facilitate the demographic things, political change, economic and social change. We've seen it in lots of different ways in how they're ushering in all this different facial recognition technology and things like that we've already seen in China and things over the last 10 years.
Yeah.
And a lot of what they're introducing over here is using the exact same technology and things like that. I do just want to say that, I think that the way that they're pushing the coronavirus stuff and this whole, pandemic or whatever, I think that will facilitate political changes that are going to be fundamentally to our detriment.
Oh yeah, it's like I say, it's a hammer and anvil at the moment. We can't resist.
Exactly,
While we're being divided by immigration, why they're doing this to us, we can't properly resist the COVID stuff. We can't get ourselves together. So as each is going to increase the other, if you get me. So the more they push the one, it's going to be able to push the other one further. The more they push that further, they're going to be able to, like I say, it's a hammer and anvil situation, and we're in the middle of that, unfortunately.
And on the flip side of that, in order to completely destroy any sort of nationalist uprising, they need full total surveillance of everyone, and that's where the COVID thing, the pandemic, comes in. That's the main thing that they're going to be bringing in off the back of this is surveillance and tracking of people at all times, no privacy for anyone, and the possibility. At the same time, they're essentially outlawing nationalism. So those two things combined will make it. I mean, this is going to sound like a huge black pill, so I apologize, but it's going to make it nigh on impossible for any kind of true nationalist movement to gain any ground, because any sort of galvanization organization will just be shut down, because it will be identified immediately by the state. This is why I think we really need to come offline. I really truly believe that we need to revert back to face-to-face meetings, trusted companions. Even letter writing, I think, is safer now than digital communication, but certainly secure communication should be high on our priorities.
I think one of the things about sort of the internet and the way that nationalists and other, political dissidents, whether you're far left or whatever else, it doesn't really matter. However you use the internet to communicate with like-minded individuals has its benefits. It amplifies your voice. It helps you connect to people from all over the world who share similar ideas and whatever else. But I think one of the things that we do need to remember is that it also separates us from that physical interaction between two individuals, more than two individuals in most instances. But you and another person can look each other in the eye, see each other's eyes, shake hands, physically be in each other's presence. It takes us away from that. And one of the benefits to the fact that they are pushing things in this way, where everything's going to be surveilled and everything's going to be policed, and it's definitely going to make it harder for nationalists to organize. But I do think it's also going to make those of us who are willing and able to organize more virile and strong and passionate and capable than ever before, because when we've been doing things over the internet and whatever else, it gives you almost a false sense of security, where you feel as though, and we're almost guilty of this to some extent, where you feel as though talking to people who are like you and think like you is doing something. But I think when push comes to shove, you need people around you who and you can trust and you can connect with physically and personally, literally connect with. And I do think that one of the positives of the way in which they're going to force us off the internet, and they're going to do that, and that's what they're pushing for. They're pushing for it quite heavily. One of the benefits of that is the fact that it will make us stronger, in the sense that we're able to organize more personally, more naturally, more one-to-one, in small communities that are able to band together almost in, literally in a communal way, like a community. That is going to help bolster us in some ways in the coming years. What's going to be difficult is how we go about projecting that message towards people who are maybe on the cusp and they're sort of on that precipice, because even right now, for example, as things are right now, people are being shut off Twitter and shut off YouTube and whatever else, and we're finding ourselves being kettled into websites like BitChute and LBRY and whatever else, and they're great platforms for putting your ideas across, but they're not necessarily.
They're coming for BitChute now.
They are.
This is the thing we need to realize. There is not going to be a safe haven on the internet.
No,
they're going to come. They're going to come for every corner.
Exactly, and even if there was a safe haven on the internet, the people who are going to that safe haven already think like you, so it immediately cuts you off from connecting with people who are on the cusp, or maybe not even on the cusp yet, but slowly but surely coming to see different ideas and different thoughts and whatever. It cuts us off from being able to connect with people who need that information right now, so that they're able to switch on. The flip side of it is that it does mean that someone like me or you or multiple people in the chat, probably most people in the chat, it does mean that those people who are already switched on are able to collectivize more physically and more literally, and we can forget about the internet and start doing things in the real world. And I think that in the end, that's going to be very important. We do need to make things real again, almost. And it kind of feels silly saying that, but in some ways, the way in which we use the internet makes politics abstract from reality, and we need things to be grounded in the physical world, and we need to be, you know, there's one thing knowing someone on the internet, and it's a totally different thing knowing someone physically and going through struggle together. Do you know what I mean?
Oh yeah, I mean, it's always whether that was going to be fought. It's not going to be fought in any on the internet. You cannot. You cannot. The internet should have always been a supplement to real world activity, but sadly, because of, and this is not just because of laziness, and we're all, like Egypt said, we're all guilty of this to a point. Busy lives, etc., etc. I mean, for one, I haven't put out as much content even on the internet, let alone in real life, just because of the pressures that they put up on us to make a living, to pay our bills, etc. And this is obviously by design. The more paperwork, people are going to get so confused and so bogged down in their own small issues that dealing with the bigger issues is almost impossible to find the time for. And this is also especially true when you try to avoid the system a little bit, like we do. I homeschool, obviously, which means that we get little support from family or none because of where we live, etc. So it makes it difficult to get together. But I do agree that that's where it should be. We need to be forming resistance, and resistance doesn't mean something like how the media might portray it. Resistance is just saying no. And one of the biggest things for me, as I said for a long time, is just being very open about how you feel about these things and explaining them to people in any conversation that you get into, that you're not happy with the replacement of your people. Make a solid, simple argument for it. And boldness has magic in it, right? Boldness leads people. Yeah, people see you say it's static so openly and confidently, and suddenly the things that they feared to say become easier to say. So that's one way.
I don't want to shill for you and for Riss, Phil, but this is relevant to the latest Mimir's Brunner video that you made. In some ways, we need to believe in something more than just, hard, dry, cold, boring, unimaginative, uninspiring facts. We need to get together and rally emotionally.
Yes.
It's so important, because one of the things that we face and one of the things that we struggle against is the fact that our enemies like to present things rather as if our argument is somehow nasty or whatever. But I feel firmly from the bottom of my heart, and I'm sure that you two do as well, and probably everyone in the chat, that the way that we feel and the things that we want for the world comes ultimately from a position of something between love and sorrow. Do you know what I mean? Maybe there's some other things going on there, but they might be the two biggest things. And somehow we need to get people to realize that this position is one of love and sorrow. The way that the world right now is disgusting, and it's heartbreaking, and it's really upsetting. But what we fight for is ultimately something beautiful and something healthy and something well. Do you know what I mean? And somehow we need to get that across to people. It's not about emotion. It is about emotion. It's not about cold, boring facts. Like, people don't necessarily care. Make your point, make it passionately, make it emotionally, and try and make it clear. And that's what matters. And 47 seconds, maybe, was it? The new Mimir Brunner. If you're in the chat and you've not watched it, go and watch it when we're done. It's very short and it's a beautiful little one. But that's the idea we need to get across to people, in my opinion, that all of this ultimately is about love and beauty, and what we're fighting against is ugly. It's death, it's chaos, it's horrible, it's awful. And that's what we're fighting against. It doesn't matter what someone says about you. They say, "Oh, you're racist," the scary word. or whatever other scary word they've got in their little arsenal of words that they think are scary that are going to make you cower away. It doesn't matter, because I can't speak for you, but I know that deep down inside, what motivates me is love. I am upset about the world, and that's that. It's upsetting, and what makes me feel that way is the fact that I've got a great love for our landscape, our people, what we have, and what we're losing, and that's sad. Do you know what I mean? It's nothing but that. It's love, and we need to get that across somehow, because that's what's going to turn people on. It doesn't matter facts and figures and whatever. We need a way to figure out, or we need to figure out a way, rather. I got that a bit topsy-turvy there, but we need to figure out a way to get that across to people. The average person who's not motivated, most people don't read, white papers and things like that. But do you know what I mean? Like, most people don't care.
Mate. Yeah.
We need to get this across almost poetically, let's say.
Well, I mean, that's one of the things we try to do with Mimmir's Brunner. Obviously, more from obviously a heathen perspective, but to show that this is not some economics. It's not about economics. It's not about numbers. It's not about. And this is when I was talking earlier about It's not even about the words indigenous or any of those things. It's about the fact that, like you just said, this is about my love and my sadness at what's happening to my people, to my folk, to the people I love, to the land of me and my ancestors. And that's where you hit people, or that's where I hope to hit them, because that's the great speech of the past, the working class speeches in the UK. That's where they hit the emotional targets. It's not just, all we want to do is be who we are, and be free to rule over ourselves, and be free to live some kind of life where we have some say in it, and it's been taken away from us, and they want to get us stuck in these intellectual arguments, stuck in arguing over the definition of the word indigenous, or arguing over the economics, or some other non-figuring factor, really. At the end of the day, speaking for us here, we're English. We come from the British Isles, and we've been okay throughout thousands of years. We don't need anybody else. And all the hardships we've overcome, everything, famine, floods, the lot, we've overcome it all. We're still here. So we don't need anybody looking out for us, or anybody treating us with pet gloves. We certainly don't need to wear masks because of some made up. We need to be able to be ourselves, and that's what they're stopping us from doing. But yeah, never give up hope. And just something to point out more on a heathen perspective, but the heathen mythology is obviously, to many eyes, somewhat fatalistic. But there is a beauty in the heathen mythology of the Northern Europeans specifically that is not seen really anywhere else. That this fatalistic nature is overcome not by some god or goddess that's going to rush in to save you, but by taking the choice into your own hands. You conquer death not by avoiding it, but by facing it head on. You conquer all of your problems in that way. Therefore, that is the metaphor that runs through much of heathen mythology, is that you cannot conquer anything by avoidance. You must face it, as dark as it may be, as upsetting, and even to its ultimate. The story of the Cimbri is one that we talk about quite a bit over at Mimmir's Brunner, because they embody this idea of when they fought the Romans. Yes, in the end, they all died. They took their own lives, the women and the children, because they stole from the Romans their prize and remained free. They never lived under the rule of another. They never debased themselves. And in that way, they had their own Ragnarok. And they conquered death in death. But maybe a bit too much to go into a Mimmir's Council, but check out Mimmir's Brunner if you haven't already, where we deal with some of these concepts. But Steve, there's a lot gone through there from me and Edric. Edric was on a good roll there, and I just added a little bit to what he said. So what have you got to say, Steve? I'm sure you got a lot.
No, I don't actually. No, I just tip my hat to both of you. Great impassioned words there, and I couldn't really have said it better myself. So, no, that's all I've got to say. Really, you've expressed it for me.
Well, Edric did the legwork there. I think he did a really good speech, and something I totally agree with. By the way, it is emotion. That's what life is. You don't remember just to highlight his point there a little bit more. When you think back at your life, you don't think about the figures on a balance sheet or how you paid that. You think about the births, the deaths, the weddings. You think about the times that hit you emotionally. They're what matter, not the how you paid your mortgage. Those things just get lost in the mix. And on your deathbed, the only thing you'll regret is not spending enough time with those you love. I doubt you'll regret when you miss that bill.
I mean, if I was to add something, I would say that those of us who have a spiritual worldview, we're all heathens here, and for me, it's a matter of proving yourself beyond this material existence.
Yes.
None of us can get to the end of our lives and look upon our progeny with any sense of pride, unless we know that we did everything we could for them. So we, in that sense, we really have nothing to fear except for cowardice ourselves. The only thing that we should be afraid of is not being willing to fight this. If we fight it and if we fight it, we lose. If we fight it, we die. If we fight it and we get put in prison, none of that ultimately matters compared to the shame. And I think that shame goes beyond this earthly life. It carries on with us into the next.
Well, whatever happens after this life, people like to discuss that a lot. But all I have to say is I don't know what happens after, not fully. I cannot say. But what I do know is that I'm here. Right? And I'm here, I believe, with reason, with intent. I don't believe I'm just some magical accident, some happy accident of the chaos of nature. So I've got to be who I am here. As Stark Arthur said in one of his poems, there is no hole for avoiding death. Right? There's no way you're going to escape what's coming. In the end, nature has its way with all of us, and there is no escaping that. And this is why in Norse mythology, in things like the Havamal, they talk about the idea of your memory being much more important than your bank balance or any other things, or how long you lived. It is about how you lived, and I think Steve's right there in saying that what we have to fear most is an eternity of failure, because if we don't get it right, if we don't fight for what we believe and we die as cowards, then we have an eternity of cowardice, and I don't think any of us wants that. And if you believe that there's more there, do you want to face your ancestors and your posterity in the afterlife with your head hung low for eternity? I'm not sure. I do. Anything else to add there?
No, that's everything. No, it's been great speaking with you both. It's been a good conversation, and thank you to everyone in the chat for some good points and good comments in there. And stay well, everyone.
Yeah, how about you, Edric?
Yeah, I think I've got everything off my chest tonight. It's been great talking to you two, as always. And great to see you from the chat as well. And like you usually say, Phil, I'll beat you to the punch tonight. There wouldn't be much point in doing it if it wasn't for everybody listening.
No.
I think we could do this in private forever, probably forever and ever. There's always something I've got to get off my chest with the way that the world is right now, and I'm sure you all feel the same. It's a sorry state of affairs. We're gonna do what we can do, and we'll keep doing what we can do, and hopefully in the end, what we can do is enough. And I think, as far as white pills go, at the end of the day, I truly believe that in the end we will win. It's just a matter of how we're going to get there, in what way, by what means. But in the end, we will win. I'm certain of that. So yeah, great talking to you. Yeah, every time it's good. So
Yeah, but yeah, the European, has always he dances with the drama of life. I don't think the European is ever happy with an easy life, ever happy when everything's going right, and heroes only come in the darkest hours. So, and as our history is full of heroes, then we must have allowed it to get darker a few times yet. So there's plenty of hope. And as we went into more spiritual conversation, I suppose, a little bit towards the end here, I think maybe we should get on Mimmir's one of the night's guys and do a more spiritual conversation. Maybe people will enjoy that without us talking about all the numbers and facts and figures, and maybe just get a bit more emotionally and spiritually involved. I don't know if you guys would be up for that one night, maybe.
Yeah, count me in.
And you, Idrik?
yeah, I'd be well up for that. Definitely.
Yeah, I think it could be good because obviously we're all heathens here, and it would be good to, because I always feel a little bit constrained here with the heathen ideas because I don't want to put too many people off. But yeah, I think a good conversation. So yeah, we'll get that set up. Anyway, thanks everyone for joining us. As Edric beat me to it, it is great having you here. And it's great to see so much involvement in the chat as well. A lot of people talking and having conversations with themselves and getting to meet each other. Remember to make sure you talk to each other outside of this chat as well. Get people's emails and things. You never know. Some of you might live quite close and you just don't know it. So anyway, I'll leave you be, and be well, and speak soon.
Great talking to everyone. Be well.
Good night.